Hello everybody, very good morning to everybody. Thanks a lot for taking your time and joining us for this webinar. This webinar is being conducted by Aspire Systems, an outsourced product development company based out of Chennai, India. And the topic today is test maturity, tweens, teens and 20s. So this will be the agenda of the session. Initially, this is Ganesh here speaking, and I'll be speaking about Aspire Systems, and I'll also be introducing the speaker, which is Vasu Swaminathan. And then Vasu will continue speaking about, introducing test maturity, and then speak about the path to test maturity. Essentially, he'll also be demonstrating a quick tool, a tool which we have put together to assess the test maturity index of your QA organization. He'll also be giving very practical tips about how to benchmark it and also continuously improve it. So that's the high-level agenda for today's session. To introduce about Aspire, we were founded in the year 1996, and as of now we have 850 plus engineers on board, and we have 175 plus test consultants. We've been consecutively ranked as the best place to work for by Great Place to Work Institute of India for the last 3 years. We have offices in Chennai, Gurgaon, San Jose, London, Augsburg and Sharjah. This is a brief profile of Vasu Swaminathan, whom I have with me right now. He's a QA specialist and practice head. He has 12 years of experience. He heads the 175 plus member testing team, and as of date he has done 50 plus testing and test automation consulting sessions for customers. And one key thing that all the customers have found, enjoyable working with him, is that he really finds innovative ways to catch all the defects that you have. And at the same time, he also has the very important aspect of overall QA costs in his mind when whatever initiatives he has in his mind, he takes. I'll now give it to Vasu.
Hi everyone, very good morning. So I think Ganesh has already charted out the agenda for this session. So I basically wanted to start off giving an introduction to test maturity, what it means in the QA community, or what it means to the product as such, and then help you move forward and discuss about the path as to how we can be a matured organization, or how we can have testing matured in organizations as part of the holistic QA process. So to start with, I'm going to give an introduction to test maturity. So just a moment, I'll just try to go to the slide. Okay. So in the meantime, by the time I open my slide, let me give an introduction as to what test maturity means, or why did we come across this specific concept basically. Now, we have been working with a lot of organizations to help them improve their quality processes, practices, and things like that. And we have also been connecting with a lot of new prospects towards their quality, towards upbringing their quality efforts and being their partners of choice. Now, in all these occasions, one thing that we have very clearly found is most of the companies, or most of the heads, basically the QA heads, or the chief quality advocates of different organizations, want to embrace new initiatives such as automation testing, performance, and all that. But in that process, what they forget is they are not sure about where their current test maturity level is, or they have not assessed their current maturity levels. And as a result, the newer initiatives, over a period of time, do not bring in the kind of results that are required. So, there could be a possible gap in the test cases itself today. They may not be providing a lot of coverage on the functionality, but without assessing that gap, probably organizations move forward and start with automation based on those test cases. And finally, after 6 to 8 months time, or 1 year down the line, after a major portion of the scripts are automated, they find out that the scripts are not really finding the kind of defects they should be finding, and still the manual testing team is able to find defects through ad hoc approaches as opposed to through the test cases. And naturally, since the scripts are based on the test cases, they are not yielding the right level of defects that should have been captured basically. So, that's one of the areas which I wanted to put across as an example as to why it is important to assess your test maturity. And by doing the assessment on test maturity, we get a fair idea as to where we stand today, where we want to go, and are we ready to take up the next level, basically. So after a lot of sessions as part of my test consulting exercise with different customers, one thing that we very clearly found is we wanted to come up with a tool that would probably, talk about the different things, that we have analyzed over a period of time. Now, if you look at the slide that we have right now in front of me, basically, we are going to share the tool with you. So the tool is basically into 4 or 5 sections, basically. So we have knowledge transfer, test planning, test design, execution, defect management, and finally a general section. And we have tried to get some questions on each of these areas based on our different consulting sessions. So, if someone is going to answer this question, someone tries to ask these questions to their team or to themselves, it would be, a good platform to assess their test maturity. So we felt that the need for this tool is pretty much required, and that would do a world of good to most of the prospects or customers who are, very keen about moving on to the next level, but at the same time, they get an opportunity to assess where they stand at a given point of time. So that is the objective behind getting this tool in place. So these questions have been collected. We had a lot of questions being collected through these consulting sessions, but we have tried to come up with one set of questions, or the real kind of questions that would help us to assess and say where the organization's maturity level is at this point of time. So I'll go through each of the sections here, and I'll basically explain the questions as we move on, and I'll also try to go over the report that gets generated at the end of it. Now, we are on the knowledge transfer section basically, and there are a set of questions to answer here. So one of the areas that we are asking is, what are the stages do your testers get involved? Now, it is important for the testers to involve as early as in the cycle as possible, but there could be situations where the testers come in at the end of it. Probably they join only during UAT. They are never part of requirements, design, or development. Now, what happens in such cases is it creates a huge gap because the tester is not, participating early in the cycle, and as a result, he may not be writing the right level of test cases, or he won't be in a position to create the kind of test cases that are really capturing the domain knowledge. And probably it also leads to metrics like defect removal efficiency, which could have been effectively done if the tester would have participated early in the cycle. What defect removal efficiency essentially means is, did the tester capture the right defect in the right phase of the life cycle? For example, if there is a defect at the requirement level, was he able to find the defect in that phase itself, as opposed to identifying it in testing, which means that the cost of fixing that defect would be very, very high. So a requirement level defect, if captured in the testing phase, is going to get, it's going to be very difficult to fix it, or the cost of fixing it is very high because it is going to call for a change in design, or in fact the architecture, or probably going back with the requirement, changing it, and things like that. So it is important for any tester to find out a defect in the specific phase itself, and hence the need for participating early in the cycle arises. So the first question that we're saying is, on the requirements phase, what is the level of participation that the tester has? Is it least, which means that he doesn't join at all, or he's kind of participating in a very unstructured or an ad hoc manner, wherein like some of the meetings, yes, he is there when there are discussions on QA, whereas in some cases he just doesn't join at all. So in a very ad hoc form, he's coming in and he's participating. And finally, there is a structured approach where he completely is part of the cycle in all the levels. So the team very clearly says that we want QA to participate from day one. So which means that the QA team or the tester participates in requirements, design, development, and UAT and things like that. So that's a very structured approach. So based on the answer that is being given to this question, the tool applies a logic and sees whether what level of test maturity is being used by the organization basically. So if at all he is going to be in lead, it means that it is not a very matured organization. There is no process in place. And if it is unstructured or ad hoc, probably some kind of process is there wherein the tester is allowed to join such meetings, but maybe it is not happening in a very formal manner or in a way it is required. And finally, he is participating in a structured manner means that the organization has got a process in place to make sure that testers are involving right from the beginning. So based on the answers, the tool applies, there is a logic applied by the tool and it generates a report out of it, which we will be discussing shortly. And similarly, if you look at the other question on the same section, what kind of a training you have for your team basically. So is it like, what is the duration of training? Is it up to 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, more than 4 weeks? Now this question in isolation doesn't contribute much to the process, but if you look at the next question 3, how are the team members educated? Now 2 and 3 are looked upon in conjunction by the tool in order to say whether the organization is at a level of process required or there is no process and things like that. Because if let's say you choose structured induction and you mention that there is a training duration of 2 to 4 weeks, it means that you know clearly what you want to do in the 2 to 4 weeks in order to get the resource up to speed. Now unfortunately, if there is unstructured induction and there is a training of 2 to 4 weeks, it means that you don't know what you want to do, but you have kind of fixed your training plan between 2 to 4 weeks, which means that the resource who has come on board may not be necessarily getting the kind of, necessarily not be equipped with the kind of knowledge or with the kind of skill set that is required in order to perform the effort required from him. And finally, if you choose more than 4 weeks for the duration and again say, unstructured induction, it means that there is no process in place. So based on the answer given to these two questions in conjunction, again the tool uses a logic and determines what kind of a process model you are in at a given point of time. So that's on the knowledge transfer part. If you move further, there are some more areas that we need to discuss under the knowledge transfer section, under the test planning and other sections. So under the test planning section, we start with question number 4, wherein we ask what kind of peer review process do you follow? Now, again, this is a very straightforward question where if you say there is no process in place, it means that there is a lack of maturity. If you say there is a basic process, though no formal, it means that you are somewhere there, but really not up to the mark where you should be. And finally, if you say that you have a formal process in place, it means that you have kind of identified what kind of mechanism needs to be, what kind of review mechanism needs to be in place in order to make sure that your product is, going through a set of processes to shape itself better. So based upon the answer to this question, the tool again generates an amber or a red or a green, which we will be seeing in the report. And similarly, do you have a requirements traceability matrix in place? At the outset, this might seem to be a very straightforward question in terms of okay, yeah, every QA team needs a requirement traceability matrix. What's the big deal? What happens if you don't maintain that? Or, yes, I have one, but I don't keep changing it, or it never changes. I have clearly, deployed one at the beginning of the project, but I have never had the opportunity to look back at it. Now, from our perspective, why we have added this is because change request is a very important area in any project that we do in IT. And, when there is a change request, what happens is it generally calls for, an assessment to the triple constraints, which is cost, scope, and quality. Now, from a development perspective, again, it is about checking whether the cost is going to be increased, or if I if I make this change request, would I need extra resources, or would the quality be compromised, and things like that. But from a QA perspective, apart from testing the change that is coming in, what is more important is where is this change request being captured. Now, at the end of the project, if I submit my requirement traceability matrix back to the customer, I want to tell him that you brought in a change request at this point of time, and this has impacted these many test cases. I had the need to create so many new test cases and modify some of the old ones. Now, where do I see that? I would obviously go back to the requirement traceability matrix to show him that this change request has brought in these additional test cases and has also impacted some of the existing test cases, and hence we have modified it, and and these are the modified and the new ones. That list will be shown in the traceability matrix. So that's the reason it becomes important to share why we need a traceability matrix in place, and hence a question on that. And what is your estimated functional coverage of your manual test cases? What level of coverage you have again shows what kind of a process you have. If you have 50 to 60% of coverage, functional coverage in your manual test cases, it means that you are getting a lot of defects in an ad hoc model as opposed to a structured testing mode. And if you have 60 to 80%, it means that you are fairly there, decent coverage. and 80 to 100%, which is a very rare, rare thing unless and until you constantly keep updating your test cases and all that. So 80 to 100 means that you are there, you are highly at a very mature level, which means that your test cases are constantly being reviewed, constantly being modified in order to keep in touch with your functional changes. And what is the count of your regression test cases? Again, this question in isolation may not be may not be a contributor to the overall score that we would be seeing in the report. But this question, along with the functional coverage and things like that, matters. So questions 6 and 7 are looked upon in conjunction in order to say what kind of a matrix or what kind of a process level the organization is at a given point of time. And moving on to test design, again, there are some more questions on the test planning section. So how did your customers perceive the recent major release? This is again something we want to hear from you in terms of how did your customers take the product? Were they happy in using it, or you had some teething issues, which is like installation issues or product displaying some minor errors after the customer took it up and all that? And finally, the product was a damn squib wherein the release did not go as expected, which is an unhappy decision. And similarly, how frequently do major software releases happen? So that is again a validator, or that's again a very major factor in terms of how good the product quality is. If there are about 2 to 4 times a year, which is basically a quarterly release, or if you're doing a 3 to 4 major releases during the year, it basically says the frequency of your release and also the kind of patches and all that goes in. And again, if you look at that question in conjunction with 10, we are asking like how many patches or minor releases happen during the year. If it's less than 10, it shows the quality of the product. 10 to 30, not a good sign. I mean, though okay, kinds. More than 30 means that there have been too many changes. The development efforts have not been really good. They have not been consistent, and as a result, a lot of regression has come in. A lot of code changes have happened that has resulted in very high defects, and you have to, you have been probably forced to, push out more than 30 patches to your customers. And do you code freeze before QA release? That is another area that we want to check out in terms of an organization's process maturity. So if an organization is doing code freeze before QA release, it means that there is a code freeze date during which they freeze the code and nobody touches it, and it goes to QA. And after that, only QA is doing the testing and all that. They file the defects and things like that. Now, if there is no code freeze and QA is starting to doing the testing, it means that there are too many code changes that are being done, and as a result, high level of regressions can happen. So that is again a process level or process maturity indicator in terms of how good you are in terms of releasing the build to QA. Do you have a code freeze, or you don't do a code freeze? And moving on to test design, do you assign priorities for your test cases? The reason for this question is there have been umpteen situations where as QA people we are forced to do priority-based testing, or I would call it risk-based testing. So the schedule for the release could be very, very limited, and there would be a need to do as much coverage as possible. Now, under such circumstances, what kind of an approach do we take up? So, if you were to do a risk-based testing, on what basis do we do that? Is there an assigned priority for the test cases that can be used in order to do the risk-based testing, wherein like the QA lead signs off saying, I would execute all priority 1 and priority 2 test cases for this release, which would give about 70% of coverage. The remaining 30%, probably we have not covered it much. So in order to get to an approach like that, it is imperative to have priority for your test cases, and hence we have this question here. Is test data available with your test cases? Yeah, so every test case needs to have test data, as we all know. If there is no test data, it means that what is the QA team using in order to test those test cases, especially in in domains like finance or derivatives, equities, or anything where a huge amount of data in terms of positive and negative needs to be tried. It is important to have that test data with the test cases, and hence there are options given to this question in terms of do you have 100% availability of test data, mostly available or not available. And again, moving on to question 14, how frequently is your test suite reviewed and updated? Now, at the end of every release, on a need basis, or rarely. So ideally, it should happen at the end of every release, or at least on need basis, which would give a score of which basically says that there is a certain level of maturity that comes in due to one of these two options being chosen. Now, if there is a very rare possibility or a rare initiative to update the test data or the test suite, it basically means that they may not be contributing at a level where they are required to contribute towards the testing. So again, like on the test data, I just said, how frequently is your test data reviewed and updated? This is again a very important action point for any QA lead or any QA team. So on a periodic basis, do we update it, or on a need basis, or rarely do we update it? So as I was talking earlier, in situations where we are testing financial products or anything that needs to any domain where there is a huge reliability on test data, it is important that either the test data is periodically modified or updated or reviewed, and if there is a modification required, it is being done. If not, basically the maturity levels could be may not be meeting expected standards. And moving further to the test execution section, there are a couple of questions around this. What's your general cycle time for testing your product? So this is again a generic idea to get about the release cycle or the execution cycle time, and this is used as a scoring factor in conjunction with other questions on this section. So during critical releases where coverage compromises can happen, what strategy you adopt? So we just spoke about the priority. Here we are trying to ask you what kind of a strategy you have in place if there is a situation where you need to do a critical release without compromising on the coverage. Now, if you chose REST-based testing, it means that you have a process in place. Either you have priority assigned for your test cases, you have a set of smoke test cases, or a set of test cases that you know that provide most of the coverage, and you execute them during a critical release. If you were to answer that there is no specific strategy, in turn, we infer that there is no strategy in place, which means that there are no test cases in order to do the risk-based testing, and hence there is a level of maturity that is below the standard that is required. And moving on to defect management, what kind of a testing life cycle you follow? This is again a generic question in terms of whether there is a defined life cycle wherein you start with a smoke test, do a functional, and then go in for a regression, or you have a functional and a regression, which means that ideally your team spends a lot of time in functional before moving on to regression. Whereas if you were to choose smoke, functional, and regression, it means that you do a smoke test where you have a set of test cases to validate the quality of the build. Now, the smoke test cases don't pass. You basically put it back to the development team saying that we are not confident about the build quality. Please produce a new build for us. Now, in case of functional, yes, you can still do it, but the time involved might be much more than the first option that you have given here. For smoke, it could be probably about 3 to 4 hours time before you decide whether to move on with the build or not. Whereas in case of option 2, which is like start with functional, it means that you have to go through most of the functional areas, which could be again 2 to 3 days time, in fact, or a week, depending upon the product complexity. So you have to decide, you have to take a call at the end of the week saying the build is not of good quality, which is not a good sign in terms of a matured organization, and hence we have this question here. What is the ratio of ad hoc defects versus defects identified through structured testing? Again, as I said earlier, one of the reasons why Aspire came up with this tool was we very clearly found that during a lot of consulting sessions with customers, a lot of customers complained or indicated that, I have a set of 10,000 test cases, but unfortunately, if I look back at the defects that were filed in the earlier release and try to map it back to test cases, I find that about, 40 to 60% of the defects are not getting mapped to test cases. Now, that means that the 10,000 test cases lying out there are not doing the job they are required to do. So, either the testers did not have the right level of knowledge in order to create the right kind of test cases to capture the defects, or there could be too many changes to the user interface or to the functionality itself that have not been, instilled in the tester's mind in some form, and as a result, they have not been able to do justice to that. So, the ratio of ad hoc defects versus structured defects kind of tells us, there is a problem lying out there, and it is up to the QA lead or the QA team to find out why is there a huge number of ad hoc defects are coming across release upon release as opposed to structured testing, especially given the fact that there is a gamut of test cases that are lying out there for testing. So if the ratio is 20 to 80, it means that it's 20% of the defects are coming through ad hoc testing and 80% are coming through structured testing, which is a good number. If it's a 40 to 60, it means that out of 100 test cases, 40 are from ad hoc, 60 are from structured, which again, I wouldn't say a good number, but at least better than probably an area to quickly look upon your test cases, modify them, review, and act upon. And finally, if the answer is 80:20, it means that if you have 100 test cases, if you have 100 defects, 80 of them are coming through ad hoc testing, which means that your structured defects are not contributing effectively for the defect capturing the defect coverage exercise. So that's an area to think about and put an action plan in place and look at the possible ways of overcoming that. And finally, if you have a huge number of ad hoc defects, how do you plan to handle them? Now, are you creating them as test cases for the next cycle and executing them? Which means that in the next cycle, if they are available as test cases, the same defects at least won't be repeated. And gradually, there should be some kind of I would say that there should be some kind of a reduced approach to the ad hoc defects that are getting identified. Now, if you don't have a plan in place for that, and if you are allowing the ad hoc defects to keep piling and they are part of the defect tracking system and not part of your test cases down the line, it means that you will be hitting more and more ad hoc defects, and as a result, at some point of time, the structured testing for your product may not happen at all. So these are again some of the questions that we wanted to include as part of the defect management. And finally, what kind of a waterfall, what kind of a life cycle model you follow for your projects is another area that could slightly modify the scoring, because for an agile, there could be a possibility that ad hoc defects could be high as opposed to the waterfall. And again, if it's a waterfall, the review mechanism and all that could be slightly different from what we do for V model or an agile. Or in case of agile, there may not be many process mechanisms like reviews or inspections or walkthrough and things like that. Whereas in case of V, the emphasis on processes could be pretty high. So this question helps us to understand or helps us to infer that the life cycle could be one of the possible reasons why all the other answers are belonging to a particular cadre. So that's one question on the life cycle to understand and see if the answers to the other questions are probably because the life cycle model is being used this way. With that, we come to the end of this questionnaire or the tool, and at the end of it, basically, you will have to provide your company name, your email address, and give a submit. And once you do that, there is a report that gets generated, which I think you'll be able to see right now on the screen. The report has been modified. The report has been organized into 2-3 sections. To start with, the report basically says what's your overall test maturity indexes. So we have got it in 3 colors basically. One is red, amber, or a green. A red indicates evolving aspects. As you could see, there is no process, and hence, there is a lot of improvement that needs to happen in that particular area. And when you say formalizing, it means that there is something that is available out there, but may not be at a level where it is required. And finally, matured, which means that yes, you are there, you are already, benchmarking things, you are already working on, you have already reached a level where you are trying to, handle that area in a very matured manner. And probably the next, the next steps in that area could be to, check out a pattern of things that are happening and see how it can be improved still better, and better. So these are the 3 sections or the 3 colors in which the report has been categorized. If you look at the table right now, there is a section header which you saw in the tool, basically the knowledge transfer, planning, design, execution, and defect management. There is a score for each of the section, and there is an overall score as you could see in the beginning of the report. So there is a score at each section which basically says whether that particular section is a red or amber or a green. And the consolidation of all the sections gives the overall score basically. So if it says overall is amber, it means that most of the sections are in amber, and hence the amber is being reported. If there are a lot of red in different sections, obviously the output will be a red. So there is a logic being applied there again to look at the different sections, consolidate them, and then come up with the overall score. So and then if you move on to the evolving aspect, based upon the answer that you are given, it shows what area you have as a evolving aspect. For example, training new member in this report says that it is red. Now the reason why it is an evolving aspect is because probably the person would have answered saying that there is unstructured training that is in place, and there is a training duration of more than 4 weeks, which means that the productivity of the training is being questioned by the tool, and hence it says that your training may not be at a matured level as we expect it to be, and hence there is an evolving aspect to that. Similarly, in the formalizing part of it, we say the testing team's exposure, which means that the peer reviews might be given as the option to the peer review question could be probably like basic, though no formal, or things like that. So that could be one of the areas why you see the peer review process as formalizing under the test planning section. Similarly, functional coverage, there may not be much of coverage chosen for the option for what level of functional coverage is available through your test cases. Probably the answer could have been 40 to 60%, which means that it is in amber. Similarly, if you look at the green, it says that risk mitigation is in green when it comes to the matured aspect. So, the answer probably is there is a risk-based testing plan in place, and the priority for the test cases could have been, given as available. So, the tool might have looked at the answer to these questions and would have said there is a priority for the test cases, and again there is a risk-based testing plan in place, and hence risk mitigation is available at an adequate level or at a level where it should be. So hence it is in matured stage. So that's kind of the report details. So these are this is essentially one part of the session that we wanted to attend. We wanted to talk about. Now going back to the presentation, we also wanted to talk about some of the other measures that an organization can take towards the attainment for test maturity or towards achieving high levels of test maturity. So the tweens part of test maturity is what we said as doing a process assessment, finding out where your gaps are, finding out where you are going wrong right now, finding out if newer initiatives can actually bring in benefits if you were to take it up. So the tween section basically focuses on identifying your gaps basically, and the teen section is basically more about I have identified my gaps, I want to work on them, I want to make sure that I'm addressing some of these areas before I move on, and finally you get to a level where you are mature basically. So what we right now saw on the path to test maturity is the gap assessment, which you do using Aspire's test maturity index tool, which is available as part of our website. So I encourage you to visit our website and take a look at the test maturity index and try to pass it on to your QA contacts and probably help them with that. So that aspect will tell you where you are today, what are the areas that you need to see in terms of where are you evolving, where are you formalizing, and where are you in a matured manner. And Aspire provides a consulting session for all our customers based on the report, so you are most welcome to get in touch with our marketing and sales teams if you are inclined in taking up a 1-hour consulting session with us, wherein we can talk about your evolving, formalizing, and matured aspects and see what could be the possible steps for remedy or for betterment next. Again, going back to the path to test maturity, so what do I do if I have identified where my gaps are? I know that I've used the test maturity tool from Aspire. I've got a report that clearly says these are the areas where I need to do a health check before I move on, and what is that I need to do, or how do I get on to the next level? So if you have done a gap analysis, if you have found where your problems are, if you have done a root cause analysis to identify your problems, then the next step obviously is to sit and take a look at that and see if you can derive metrics out of that, or come up with a quantitatively manageable set of things which can be used as a benchmark to move forward. So the second stage of the path to test maturity will be your benchmarking and measure continuously stage. So if you look at the slide that is available in front of you, these are some of the metrics, or these are some of the numbers that you can derive from the root cause that you're doing. For example, as part of your gap analysis, you found that there is a lot of evolving aspect in terms of defect leakage with customers. Customers are not happy. Let's assume that one of your answers to the questions is like, did you find the last release made by your company being successfully adopted by your customers? Now your answer is unhappy because the customers are not happy with that release. Probably that's an area to work upon and see why your customers are not happy. Assuming that you do a Ishikawa diagram, or what you call as a fishbone diagram for that particular problem, you end up identifying multiple causes to that effect. So the multiple causes could essentially drill down to one area, which could be like, the test cases are not good, and as a result, the defects are getting leaked, and so customers are finding defects in production, which should have ideally been caught by my testing team. Now, if that is your final root cause analysis result, then you will take up defect leakage as a measure or a benchmark to get started with. So you want to track it release upon release, and then you want to see how it is, being curtailed, or how do you alleviate defect leakage over a period of time. So you take upon every release and then start benchmarking it. Probably during the first release, post the gap analysis, immediate gap analysis, it could be very high. But then, you can take help from Aspire, or probably you can, discuss with your own teams to see how that kind of a situation can be handled. So companies, we have been helping companies like, a lot of enterprises and ISVs who come to us with such kind of problems, wherein like we do the root cause analysis using the, different statistical tools that are available, and then go back and submit a report very clearly saying, this is why you are having these problems, and and we would like to come in as a consultant, or help you with help you with reducing the defect leakage, or the test execution time and all that over a period of time. So Aspire comes in as a consultant at that point of time, clearly talks to stakeholders, brings in all the stakeholders together, helps to make the product a superior one over a period of time. So these are some of the metrics that we captured during that phase. So defect leakage is one of them. So defect leakage will clearly be high at the time post the gap analysis. But over a period of time, after you start implementing processes, after you take help from consultants like Aspire, we are sure that you will be able to come down on that and eventually reach a level, as you could see from the report here. This is from one of our customers where they had about 12% at some point of time. It was 8 and then went down to 12 and then came down to 2. And over a period of time, if you look at it, it has been always less than 2, or probably 0, 0.1 and things like that. Now, it takes time in order to achieve that, and that's why you need help from experts like Aspire to do that. So, benchmarking and measuring continuously is a very important area post the gap analysis step, and that will be the second step towards improving your test maturity measures. And finally, once you have started doing benchmarking and measuring over a period of time, and then you get into the continuously optimizing mode, wherein like you want to look at patterns of things. You want to make sure that things are going or at a number that is expected to be in. For example, you might be hitting a constant defect leakage of 2% for a period of, let's say, 6 to 8 months for 2-3 releases. Now, does it mean that I have reached a mature level? Does it mean that I've already reached a stage where nothing needs to be done about that? No, that's not the point. Now the point is, can I reduce the number a little more better? Can I bring it to less than 1%? How can I optimize from where I am? So that is the third stage of continuous optimization, wherein you try to revisit your numbers, bring in your upper and lower control limits, use again statistical tools in order to achieve the level of limits that you have set for you, and then see how it can be brought down to a realistic number, or probably something like a 6 sigma. Probably when you start, you are not 6 sigma, but after you benchmark, after you start measuring over a period of time, identify patterns, identify trends and all that, next level is to go in for continuous optimization, which might help you to reach a 6 sigma number of 99.6 or 99.9 basically. So that's the continuous optimization level, wherein you have a lot of quantitatively manageable things in place. You start identifying patterns and then try to revisit your control limits, or look at areas for improvement and again keep improving from there. So this is the path towards test maturity. And then if you have reached this level and if you're doing continuous optimization, and that is the point where if you're looking for newer initiatives, or if you're looking for newer areas to venture into, then it makes more sense to do that, because you always know that you are the engine underneath all that is running fine. That's why we had an image at the beginning of the slide, wherein we had an engine that said, here's the requirements gathering phase, here is the defect management cycle, here is the review process, and here is all the equipment that you have as part of the engine. Now, if you look at it, the engine, we are right now, if you look at the slide, it is displaying the first image. So the engine looks all good from outside, but the most important thing is there are a lot of parts inside it. You will have to look at it underneath and make sure that all the different parts contribute towards the engine operating in a very successful manner. Now, if that is not happening, you need to take a look at it and ensure that it's fixed before you move on and do other things about it. So considering that, at the continuous optimization level, it is important for you to revisit your initiatives of venturing into newer automation, or newer performance testing, or security testing, or penetration, or bringing in a technology change and things like that, to see where am I standing at this point of time? Am I doing optimized? Am I at the right level in order to introduce new things? Once you get that confirmation at that level, it will be easy for you to move forward. And the most important thing that I wanted to emphasize, or to sum it all up, I wanted to emphasize on this particular slide, which is collaboration. So we are all talking about collaborative things today in the software world, not alone in software, of course, out of software as well. But in particular, we are talking about tools like Wiki, Agile, and all that, which is towards peer programming and all that, which is all towards a collaborative approach about building better software. Now, taking a cue from there, we at Aspire follow clearly a mechanism called as Propel Q, or what we call as a very collaborative approach towards building a software that forms 4 areas, which is like principles, practices, people, and platform. Now, when we say this, what we essentially mean is all the stakeholders should come together in order to deliver a product with superior quality. And in that process, the stakeholders will be part of the people function, and you have to identify the right platforms. For example, the right kind of test tools, right defect logging tools, the test lab, automation tools, and things like that. And you should have a set of principles on the basis of which the people and the platforms are working together. Like, as we spoke about earlier, the triple constraints of time, budget, and quality, ensuring that, different people come together and work together, the product management team, the development team, the testing team, the release team, the end customer, probably somebody who's representing them. So all of them come together and make sure that, the product is evolving or shaping up in a way it should be. And, playing around with the working software frequently to make sure that, feedback loop goes on. People from different aspects or different walks of the software or the product come back and say, okay, this is how it should be. This is the kind of performance I'm looking at. This is the kind of usability I'm looking at, and things like that. And finally, the practices section, wherein the QA team testing it from the user's perspective, automating the turnkey test, focus on performance, usability, and security, and things like that. So these 4 areas come together, or these 4 areas should come together in order to help deliver a superior product. And this collaborative approach is something Aspire very clearly emphasizes on what we call as the integrated QA approach from our testing desk. So this is something I wanted to touch base upon before I conclude this presentation. And a collaborative approach towards software building is a must to make sure that the product is coming out with very high standards of delivery, or very high quality bar, quality delivery. So with that, we conclude this presentation, and we open the session for questions. Ganesh, anything? Okay. So we would like to give some time for the participants to throw some questions. The session is open to you. You can type your questions on the chat window. We'll have a couple of minutes allowed for that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type in. We'll be able to take it up and answer. We have a question here from one of the attendees of this webinar. The question is like, what do we do? You mentioned that Aspire does a consulting session wherein we talk about the product, what you can help us with, and things like that. So the question is like, what forms part of the consulting session? Actually, the consulting session is more like there are 2 ways of consulting that we do here at Aspire. So one of the areas is a 1-hour consulting session based on the tool basically. So that's one thing that we do. There we discuss about, we try to understand your product, we try to understand your pain points and generally suggest measures for improvement and things like that. But beyond that, there is another level of consulting which becomes into a precursor towards the actual engagement. If at all people want to get along with Aspire in the engagement model, there is a precursor consulting step wherein we come to your premise, do it for about 4 to 6 weeks time, and during that time we take a look at all your processes, talk to all your stakeholders, understand what kind of processes you have in place, and then finally take some time to create a gap analysis report that very clearly a detailed, in a very detailed mode explains on the manual testing part what are the pros and cons in the existing system. On the automation side, what are the key significant advantages that that you have today? What are the key improvements or refinements to be made? And again, holistically, what are the better points? What are the key areas that have helped you to build your product better? And finally, what could be the possible areas that you need to focus on in order to improve your quality? So this gap analysis report is submitted at the end of 4 to 6 weeks time, and during the this report will be available to you in a PDF or a Word document form, wherein it will very clearly say what are the areas that we looked into, what did we find, what are our suggestions to overcome some of the issues that we have identified and things like that. And this might also have some kind of samples or templates in terms of how your manual test cases can be written better, what could be the different techniques that can be used in order to create better manual test cases, and if there is a need for automation, we automate some test cases, show our automation framework design and things like that, why your automation scripts are not able to identify the kind of defects required, what is going wrong, why is your framework not being able to leverage the automation scripts efficiency and things like that. So that's what generally the package comprises of.
The go live date is fixed.
Okay, so we have another question here. Once we have predicted, communicated the go live date for a project to stakeholders/market, it doesn't change often. QA team being at the end of the STLC typically gets squeezed in timelines. Even the timelines are impacted due to different reasons. Hence, quality team may have to compromise some processes. Any thoughts on this?
Hemant.
Yeah, the question is from Mr. Hemant Jeddi. Thanks for that. I think one of the areas that we discussed as part of the session was to do a risk-based testing, and today risk-based testing is taking a lot of importance because most of the companies want to do a very fast time to market, and during that process they also don't want to compromise on quality. Now QA team being at the receiving end in most of these circumstances, risk-based testing could be a good approach to follow, though to start with it may not be yielding the kind of benefit it should be giving. A proper priority for the test cases, identifying the right level of test cases to provide coverage, putting in better mechanisms can actually help the QA team, though they come at the end of the cycle, to provide better coverage on the product. And today exploratory testing, rapid testing and risk-based testing are some of the approaches that are catching up very fast in the market. So a combination of these techniques can actually help the QA team improve its coverage to a major extent, which we have also seen, which we have also witnessed from some of the assignments that we have worked on. If you have a very dynamic environment and very frequent releases, how to keep regression suite updated and control the quality of products? Any tips? I think the very frequent release thing is itself a way to update your regression suite. So one of your team members can probably focus on how to update the suite while one of the person is focusing on execution. So let's say that you have testers who are testing the product for over a period of time. You can rotate the testers between the products or between the different modules and ask them to look at it from a third eye perspective and say, okay, last release somebody else tested this. Can you test this time and see whether you are able to find new defects, or if there is a scope for improving the regression suite or updating it and things like that. Now, such kind of recommendations or comments can be stored somewhere in the configuration management system, so that other testers can also have a look at it and see, how that can be improved for or implemented for other modules. I mean, at this point of time, that's a recommendation I can definitely give as a off-the-cuff remark. But I think, probably if you can schedule a consulting session, we can talk more about it, Mr. Ravi Prakash Jangra.
Yeah, another question that we have is, when should we call that the testing for a product is completed and the testing scenarios have been comprehensive?
I think I would take a theoretical approach to this question. So when would you say testing has been completed? Most of the times after the budget is over. But I think you will never be, as we see as an aphorism in many forums, you would never be able to say testing is completed here. So testing can, only guarantee, okay, there is a certain level of defect, reduction that has happened, but it can never guarantee the absence of defects. So defects are going to be there, and there is no one stage where you say testing has been completed. It purely depends upon your deadlines, your timelines, and things like that. But I think what is more important is what is the level of coverage that I'm providing to my customer. So I think that is where the question stems from. So if I will have to guarantee some kind of coverage, how do I do it? Now, as we discussed earlier, risk-based testing, priority-based test cases are some of the options that can help you to improve your coverage.
Another question is, what are the category defects I have to consider for defect leakage by Anandan? I think that's more of, I mean, it's not like a cosmetic defect.
Right. Where does QA stands when requirements are changing oftenly? I think QA standpoint should be to validate the requirements change with respect to the triple constraints of quality, scope, and cost, and go back and say whether this is acceptable or not. As quality teams, we hold the certification authority to say whether the product should go out to the market or not. So it depends on when the requirement change is coming from. If the stakeholder is making a requirement change at the beginning of the product development life cycle, if it is acceptable, probably teams will accept it and QA can take it up. But if it is coming at a time when most of the testing is over and the product is about to be released, I think QA should very clearly take a stand saying that we are not allowing this change to happen. I think that call has to come from the QA manager to the development manager, and he takes it across to the product management team and customer. So as I said earlier, these are some of the very thought-provoking questions that have been asked by different people who have been attending this session since 3:30 or UK's time 10 o'clock. So thank you all for attending this. And as I said earlier, please, we definitely request you and encourage you to take up our test maturity tool, which is available on the website. And please get in touch with our marketing folks if you are interested in a 1-hour free consulting session, wherein we can talk about the different questions that have been asked here and more beyond this. So I request you all to make use of the tool and the consulting session. With that, I think we are almost at the end of the session. There are no further questions. So once again, thanks to all of you for attending this. Have a great day.